At our family Christmas dinner, my husband proudly introduced his colleague, Vanessa, placing his hand on her visibly pregnant belly. "We're expecting a miracle," he announced. The room fell silent until I raised my glass and smiled. "Speaking of miracles," I said, "let's all watch one unfold." The mounted TV flickered to life, showing footage of them in our home, plotting how to divorce me once the baby arrived. But the true revelation? I wasn't just the dutiful labor attorney he'd dismissed as too naive to understand modern marriages. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. For the past year, Archie had grown increasingly bold with his indiscretions. His late-night emergencies at the office became more frequent, his phone always face down, and the scent of unfamiliar perfume lingering on his clothes. Through it all, I maintained the facade of the trusting wife, nodding sympathetically when he explained that his demanding role as a financial advisor required these sacrifices from both of us. "You wouldn't understand the complexities of high-net-worth clients, Candace," he'd say, his tone dripping with condescension. "They need constant reassurance, especially during volatile markets." And I'd smile, playing my part perfectly while observing every inconsistency in his stories. The signs had been there from the beginning: small discrepancies in his schedule, mysterious receipts, and the way he'd rapidly end phone calls when I entered the room. But nothing compared to the evening I discovered a sonogram image accidentally left in his jacket pocket, dated just 3 weeks earlier. My heart pounded as I photographed it before returning it exactly as I'd found it. That night, as Archie slept soundly beside me, I made my first fateful decision. If my husband was planning a new life with another woman and their child, I deserved to know the full truth before it blindsided me. The next morning, I contacted Clara, an old law school friend who specialized in digital surveillance law. Hypothetically speaking, I began during our coffee meeting, what are the legal parameters for recording conversations in one's own home? Clara's eyebrow raised slightly, but she provided methodical explanations about single-party consent laws and expectations of privacy. By the time our coffee cups were empty, I had a clear understanding of what evidence would be admissible and what might cross legal boundaries. 3 days later, wireless cameras were discreetly installed throughout our home. Living room, kitchen, home office, and guest bedroom, places where Archie might conduct conversations, never in private spaces like bathrooms. The system sent footage directly to a secure cloud server that only I could access. What began as a search for confirmation evolved into meticulous documentation as I watched the truth of my marriage unravel in high definition. 2 weeks after installing the cameras, I captured the first undeniable evidence. Archie brought Vanessa to our home while I was supposedly at a 3-day legal conference. They discussed their relationship openly in our living room, Vanessa rubbing her growing belly while Archie promised her that, once the baby is born, I'll file for divorce. Candace is too consumed with her client's labor disputes to contest anything aggressively. The footage continued to accumulate. I watched as they planned their future in my home, using my kitchen, lounging on furniture I had selected. The most damning conversation occurred in Archie's home office, where they discussed finances, specifically how he had been systematically hiding assets in anticipation of divorce proceedings. "I've been moving funds into the offshore account for months," he told Vanessa, pulling up spreadsheets on his computer. "She has no idea about the Harrison investment or the Cayman arrangement. By the time she figures it out, the divorce will be finalized with the standard settlement." With each new recording, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about calculated financial deception. As a labor attorney who had built a career fighting for fair treatment of employees, I recognized exploitation when I saw it. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent years protecting others from being taken advantage of, yet had failed to apply that same vigilance to my own marriage. 1 month before Christmas, I contacted Jacob Steinman, widely regarded as the most formidable divorce attorney in Madison County. During law school, I had helped his family's manufacturing business navigate a complex labor dispute that saved them millions in potential settlements. He had promised to return the favor someday, though I never imagined it would be under these circumstances. "I need your most discreet consultation," I told him, providing no details over the phone. We met at his office after hours, where I presented a carefully curated selection of the footage I had collected. "Jesus Christ," Jacob muttered, removing his glasses after watching Archie explain to Vanessa exactly how he planned to minimize my divorce settlement. "He's not just having an affair, he's committing financial fraud. Is the evidence admissible?" I asked, the lawyer in me needing confirmation before proceeding. "Single-party consent applies here. You own the home jointly, and there's no expectation of privacy in common areas. The financial discussions are particularly damning," Jacob confirmed, already taking notes. "But timing will be everything. When do you want to proceed?" That's when the plan crystallized. Archie had already mentioned bringing Vanessa to our annual Christmas dinner, introducing her as a colleague who had nowhere to go for the holidays. The audacity of the gesture provided the perfect stage for revelation. "Christmas," I answered with newfound clarity. "We wait until Christmas." The following weeks were an exercise in calculated restraint. I continued to play the role of the oblivious wife, even expressing enthusiasm about hosting Archie's pregnant colleague who needs support during the holidays. Meanwhile, I worked with Jacob to prepare comprehensive divorce filings, complete with evidence of hidden assets and financial misrepresentation. We assembled a forensic accountant's report tracing every account Archie had mentioned in his recorded conversations. As Christmas approached, I made one final addition to our holiday decor: a new smart TV in the dining room, ostensibly for watching holiday classics during dinner, but connected to the same server that housed months of incriminating footage. The morning of Christmas Eve, I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same person who had discovered the sonogram months earlier. She was focused, resolute, and, surprisingly, calmer than she had been in years. For the first time since uncovering Archie's betrayal, I felt a sense of control returning. "Tonight," I whispered to my reflection, "everything changes." Before the cameras and the betrayal, before I became the woman who would orchestrate a Christmas revelation, I was simply Candace Mercer, a dedicated labor attorney known for her methodical approach and unwavering commitment to her clients. Archie and I had met 8 years ago at a charity gala where he had charmed me with his confidence and ambitious outlook. He was handsome in that polished financial sector way, tailored suits, perfect haircut, and a smile that seemed to promise security. "Labor law?" he had said with a hint of amusement when I told him my specialty. "That's certainly noble, though there's not much money in fighting for the little guy." I should have recognized that first flicker of condescension, but instead, I was drawn to his worldliness, his seeming sophistication. Within a year, we were married in a ceremony that, looking back, reflected more of his preferences than mine. Elaborate, showy, designed to impress his colleagues and clients. Our early marriage settled into a comfortable rhythm. I built my practice representing employees in discrimination and wrongful termination cases, while Archie climbed the ranks at Meridian Financial Partners. We purchased a colonial-style home in the prestigious Oakwood neighborhood, complete with the requisite 4 bedrooms for our future family, though Archie always found reasons to delay starting one. "The market's too volatile right now," he'd explain. "We should wait until my next promotion. Or, let's take that trip to the Maldives first. Children will make travel impossible." I accepted these postponements, focusing instead on my growing reputation in labor law. By our 5th anniversary, I had won several high-profile cases, including a class action against Steinman Manufacturing, which ironically led to my friendship with Jacob Steinman after helping his family implement fair labor practices that actually improved their productivity and employee retention. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Archie's attitude toward my career was a study in contradictions. He boasted about my successes to his colleagues. "My wife's quite the barracuda in the courtroom," but privately diminished the significance of my work. "It's cute how passionate you get about these hourly workers," he'd say, scrolling through his phone while I discussed a particularly challenging case. "But you realize they'd drop you in a heartbeat if someone offered them $1 more an hour, right?" These comments stung, but I rationalized them as cultural differences between our professional worlds. His, dominated by profit margins and bottom lines, mine, by human impact and equity. I began sharing less about my cases, and he seemed relieved not to pretend interest. Our social life revolved primarily around Archie's professional connections: dinners with clients, holiday parties with his firm, weekends with couples where the husbands worked in finance and the wives managed charity foundations or interior design businesses. In these settings, I was introduced with a quick, "This is Candace, my wife. She's a lawyer too, but for labor issues," before conversations turned to market trends or property investments. The first tangible shift in our marriage came after Archie's promotion to senior wealth advisor. His hours extended, his travel increased, and his availability, both physically and emotionally, diminished. When I expressed concern about our growing distance, he deflected with explanations about high-net-worth clients who needed white-glove service at any hour. "This is how success works, Candace," he'd explain with that patient tone reserved for someone who couldn't possibly understand. "Sometimes I worry your practice has given you unrealistic expectations about work-life balance. Not everyone gets to clock out at 5 and feel good about helping some secretary keep her job." I began to notice other changes too. He updated his wardrobe, joined an exclusive fitness club, and became meticulous about his appearance in ways that seemed excessive even for client meetings. His phone became an extension of his hand, yet he would step into another room to take certain calls. The night of the Wellington client dinner marked the first time I felt something was truly wrong. Archie had insisted I attend, emphasizing how important the potential client was to his firm. Yet when we arrived at the restaurant, he seemed surprised, almost annoyed, to see a beautiful woman already seated at our table. "Vanessa," he said, his voice carrying an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us tonight." "Carl insisted his whole team be here," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "since I'm handling the portfolio analysis." Throughout dinner, I noticed their careful dance of professionalism punctuated by moments of familiarity that seemed too intimate for colleagues. The way he anticipated which wine she would prefer, how she knew about his shellfish allergy before I could warn the waiter. The inside jokes referenced obliquely and dropped when I showed interest. On the drive home, when I casually mentioned these observations, Archie became immediately defensive. "For God's sake, Candace, not everyone is violating labor laws. She's a portfolio analyst, one of the best in the firm. Of course we have a good working relationship." "I never suggested anything improper," I said carefully. "I just thought it was interesting how in sync you seemed." "This is exactly why I hesitate to introduce you to my colleagues," he snapped. "You analyze everyone like they're on the witness stand. It's exhausting." That night, as Archie slept, I found myself staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in my mind. It wasn't jealousy that kept me awake, but the dawning realization that my husband had become a stranger to me, someone who spoke a private language with others that excluded me by design. In the months that followed, I paid closer attention. I noticed how Archie mentioned Vanessa with increasing frequency, always in professional contexts, but with an underlying enthusiasm. How client emergencies often coincided with days she was leading presentations. How he began to reference team dinners that ran inexplicably late. Looking back, I recognize that period as the twilight of my naivety, I was still the trusting wife, the dedicated attorney, the woman who believed in the fundamental goodness of her husband despite mounting evidence to the contrary. I hadn't yet become the strategist who would install cameras or consult on surveillance laws or plan a Christmas revelation. That transformation began on an ordinary Tuesday in April, when Archie called to inform me he wouldn't be home that night. The sigh. Hansen Portfolio is in trouble. The whole team is pulling an all-nighter to salvage it, he explained, the sounds of a restaurant, not an office, barely audible in the background. Of course, I replied automatically. Don't worry about me. You're the best, Candace, he said, relief evident in his voice. This is why I married you. You understand what it takes. As I ended the call, something final shifted within me. It wasn't any single lie that triggered my suspicion, but the accumulated weight of 100 small deceptions. That night, for the first time, I allowed myself to truly consider what I had been avoiding. My husband was living a life separate from our marriage, and I needed to discover what that meant for my future. The morning after Archie's all-nighter, I decided to break from my usual routine. Instead of leaving for the office early, I lingered over coffee at our kitchen island, waiting. When Archie finally arrived home shortly after 7, his surprise at finding me there was palpable. "You're still home?" he asked, loosening his tie. His collar was slightly rumpled and faint shadows underlined his eyes. "I have a client meeting at 9, I replied, studying him over the rim of my mug. Thought, I'd enjoy a slow morning for once. How's the Hansen portfolio? A flicker of confusion crossed his face before recognition set in. Oh, right, we managed to stabilize it. The Asian markets helped once they opened. He moved toward the stairs. I need a shower and fresh clothes before heading back in. As he disappeared upstairs, I noticed his briefcase sitting by the door. Acting on an impulse I couldn't quite name, I quietly opened it. Inside were the standard files and his laptop, but tucked into a side pocket was a receipt from Rivertree Hotel, a room service order for 2, time-stamped 11:42 p.m. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, and chocolate-covered strawberries. Not exactly standard fare for an emergency financial strategy session. I photographed the receipt with my phone and returned everything exactly as I'd found it. When Archie came downstairs freshly showered, I was already gathering my things to leave. "You didn't have to wait for me," he said, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek. The scent of his shower gel couldn't quite mask another fragrance beneath, something floral and distinctly feminine. "Just finishing my coffee," I responded with a practiced smile. "Good luck today. Try to get some rest if you can." That receipt became the first entry in what would eventually become a detailed log of discrepancies. I created a password-protected folder on my personal laptop, labeled innocuously as Bennett Case Research, and began documenting patterns in Archie's behavior. The signs multiplied once I knew to look for them. Credit card statements showing dinner charges on nights he claimed to be working late at the office. Mysterious weekend client golf retreats, with no corresponding entries in his work calendar that I could occasionally glimpse. The increasing frequency with which Vanessa's name appeared in his explanations, always professional, always necessary, always just beyond my ability to verify. 3 weeks after finding the hotel receipt, I encountered Archie and Vanessa together unexpectedly. I had finished court early and decided to surprise Archie with lunch. As I approached Meridian Financial's glass-fronted building, I spotted them exiting together. They weren't touching, nothing overtly inappropriate, just 2 colleagues leaving. For lunch. But there was an ease between them, a gravitational pull that kept them closer than strictly professional boundaries would dictate. I stepped back, allowing the crowd to obscure me, and watched as they walked to a small bistro 2 blocks away. Through the restaurant window, I observed their interaction, the animated conversation, the shared laughter, the way Vanessa touched Archie's hand to emphasize a point and let her touch linger seconds longer than necessary. More telling was how my husband leaned toward her, fully engaged in a way he rarely was with me anymore. I didn't confront him. Instead, I added this observation to my growing file, noting the time, location, and the jade green dress Vanessa wore. Details that might seem insignificant, but formed a composite picture of escalating intimacy. That evening, when Archie mentioned his productive lunch meeting with the compliance team, I nodded and asked appropriate questions about regulatory concerns, never revealing I knew exactly how he'd spent his afternoon. The most blatant lie came during the Memorial Day weekend. Archie had informed me weeks earlier that he needed to attend a financial conference in Chicago, an annual requirement to maintain his certification. I had plans to visit my sister Phoebe in Boston, so the timing seemed convenient for both of. 2 days before the weekend, my sister called. "Bad news, Candace. Connor's come down with strep throat. The doctor says he's still contagious, and with the baby, I don't think your visit is a good idea this weekend." I assured her it wasn't a problem, and wished my nephew a quick recovery. That evening, I told Archie about the change of plans. "That's too bad," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "I'd cancel Chicago if I could, but the firm's paying thousands for this conference." "I understand," I replied. "I'll use the time to catch up on the Ramirez case." When Friday arrived, I drove Archie to the airport, kissed him goodbye, and watched him walk toward the security checkpoint. Then, instead of leaving, I found a coffee shop with a view of the departure gates and waited. 20 minutes later, Vanessa arrived, rolling a small suitcase. She checked her phone, scanned the terminal, and then proceeded to the same gate where Archie had disappeared. That night, out of a perverse need for confirmation, I called the hotel where the conference was supposedly being held. "I'm trying to reach Archie Mercer," I explained to the receptionist. "He's attending the Financial Advisors Certification Conference." "I'm sorry, ma'am," came the polite response. "We don't have a guest registered under that name, and there's no financial conference at our hotel this weekend." The final confirmation came when I checked our joint credit card statement online and found charges from the Grand Shoreline Resort in Sanibel, Florida, a beachfront property known for its romantic atmosphere. 2 spa treatments, multiple restaurant charges, all neatly categorized as business expense in Archie's meticulous financial tracking system. I added these details to my growing file, which now contained dozens of documented lies spanning months. The labor attorney in me recognized the pattern. I was building a case, methodically gathering evidence the way I would for a wrongful termination suit. But I hadn't yet decided what verdict I was seeking or what remedy I would demand. The turning point, the moment that transformed my passive documentation into active investigation, occurred on a rainy Tuesday in July. I had come home early with a migraine to find an unfamiliar luxury sedan parked down the street from our house. Through the medication haze and pounding head, I felt a cold certainty about what I would find if I entered my home. Instead of going inside, I drove around the block and parked where I could observe our house without being seen. 40 minutes later, Vanessa emerged from our front door, Archie close behind her. In the shelter of our covered porch, partially obscured by decorative pillars, they embraced. Not a collegial hug, but the intimate entanglement of lovers, his hands threading. Through her hair, her body pressed against his. The kiss they shared left no room for alternative interpretations. As Vanessa hurried through the rain to her car, Archie remained on the porch watching her leave. His expression was unguarded, tender in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in years. When her car disappeared around the corner, he checked his watch, glanced up and down the street, then went back inside, presumably to remove any evidence of their time together before I arrived home. That night, as Archie described his productive day at the office, I realized 2 things with perfect clarity. My husband was involved in a serious affair, and he believed me too trusting, or perhaps too dim, to ever discover it. "You know what's interesting about labor law?" I said suddenly, interrupting his fabricated account of a client meeting. "What's that?" he asked. looking slightly thrown by the non sequitur. Evidence. The way patterns emerge over time. How people believe they're being clever, but they leave. Traces everywhere. I smiled at him, not bothering to warm it with affection. It's fascinating what you can discover when you start paying attention. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his features. Then his confidence reasserted itself. Sounds tedious, he replied, returning to his phone. But I'm glad you find it engaging. In that exchange, I recognized the fundamental mistake Archie had made throughout our marriage. He had consistently underestimated me. And in that moment, I decided to use his blind spot to my advantage. The day after witnessing Archie and Vanessa outside our home, I made my first strategic decision: to transform my haphazard documentation into systematic surveillance. This wasn't an emotional reaction. It was a professional one. As an attorney, I understood that instinct and observation weren't enough. I needed indisputable evidence. My first call was to Clara Jenkins, a law school classmate who had built her practice around privacy law and digital rights. We met at a cafe 20 miles from my neighborhood, where the likelihood of encountering anyone from Archie's social circle was minimal. "This is quite the hypothetical scenario," Clara said after I outlined my situation in carefully anonymous terms. Her knowing expression told me she understood these weren't theoretical questions. "One-party consent is the standard in our state," she explained, stirring her latte. "Which means if you're present during a conversation, you can legally record it without informing the other participants. However," she continued, leaning forward, "if you're setting up recording devices that will capture conversations when you're not present, that gets complicated." "How complicated?" I asked, taking careful mental notes. "In common areas of your own home, living room, kitchen, halls, there's generally no expectation of privacy, especially for non-residents. For someone who doesn't live there, entering your home creates a diminished expectation of privacy." She paused. "But bedrooms and bathrooms are different. Those are spaces where society recognizes an expectation of privacy, even within a shared dwelling." "And for a spouse?" I pressed. Clara considered this. "More complex. Courts often view marital homes as shared space where both parties have equal rights. The key question becomes, would a reasonable person expect privacy in that context?" She tilted her head. "What exactly are you considering, hypothetically speaking?" "Video surveillance in common areas of a home. No audio recording when the homeowner isn't present." Clara nodded slowly. "Video without audio in common areas that you personally own or co-own would generally be permissible, especially if the purpose is to document unauthorized visitors or activities. But I'd advise against hidden cameras in bathrooms or bedrooms. Those could potentially cross both legal and ethical lines." Before leaving, Clara handed me a business card with a name handwritten on the back. "If your hypothetical friend needs technical assistance, Jackson Way is discreet and thorough. He works with law firms on digital evidence collection." 2 days later, I met Jackson at his small office above a computer repair shop. His space was minimalist, just a desk, 3 monitors, and walls lined with certificates in digital forensics and security systems. "Clara explained your situation," he said without preamble. "You need surveillance that's legally defensible and undetectable." I nodded, appreciating his directness. "I can install wireless cameras in common areas, living room, kitchen, home, office, entryway. They'll record video only, no audio, to comply with wiretapping statutes. The feeds will transmit to a secure cloud server that only you can access." He pulled out a tablet, showing me examples of cameras disguised as smoke detectors, wall clocks, and air fresheners. "How difficult are they to detect?" I asked. "To the average person? Nearly impossible. They don't emit visible light, there's no noticeable heat signature, and they blend perfectly with normal household items. Unless someone is actively sweeping for surveillance equipment, they won't find them." The installation happened 3 days later while Archie attended a weekend. Client golf retreat. another thinly veiled excuse to spend time with Vanessa. Jackson worked efficiently, placing 5 cameras throughout our home. One in the living room disguised as a decorative wall clock, one in the kitchen hidden within a new smart speaker, one in Archie's home office embedded in a power strip, one in the foyer concealed in a mirror frame, and one overlooking the back patio tucked into outdoor lighting. "Everything's connected to this secure server," Jackson explained, showing me the interface on my laptop. "The system is motion-activated to conserve storage space. You'll receive notifications when movement is detected, and you can review footage remotely from any device using this encrypted connection." After Jackson left, I walked through my home, studying each hidden camera location. From the outside, nothing had changed. The house remained the tasteful, orderly space Archie proudly showcased to colleagues and friends. But beneath that unchanged surface, a fundamental shift had occurred. My home was now my witness. The first 2 weeks yielded little of interest, just our regular household routines, the cleaner coming on Thursday, and a brief visit from a neighbor returning a borrowed garden tool. I began to wonder if Archie had become more cautious after our cryptic conversation about evidence and patterns. Then, on a Wednesday, when I was scheduled to be in court all day, my phone buzzed with a motion detection alert. Through my secure connection, I watched in real time as Archie entered our home at 1:43 p.m., during what should have been work hours. 20 minutes later, Vanessa arrived, greeted with a familiarity that confirmed they'd been in our home together before. I observed their casual navigation of my space, Archie offering her a drink from our bar, Vanessa knowing exactly where to hang her coat. They settled onto the living room sofa, their conversation animated but silent to my remote viewing. After about 30 minutes of what appeared to be serious discussion, they moved upstairs, beyond the view of my strategically placed cameras. 2 hours later, they reappeared in the kitchen, Vanessa sitting at the island while Archie prepared coffee. Their domestic comfort in my space felt like a physical blow, even viewed through the clinical distance of a surveillance feed. Yet I forced myself to watch, cataloging details. How Vanessa absently touched her stomach while speaking. How Archie checked his watch repeatedly as the afternoon progressed, likely calculating my expected return time. After Vanessa left, Archie spent several minutes straightening pillows, disposing of coffee cups and opening windows, erasing evidence of their meeting. He even sprayed air freshener in the living room, a precaution that now seemed laughably inadequate given the digital record of his betrayal. That evening, I maintained my usual demeanor, asking about his day and sharing edited highlights from my court appearance. Watching him construct elaborate fictions about client meetings and portfolio reviews, I experienced a strange doubling of reality, observing both his performance and my own, 2 actors in a domestic drama, neither acknowledged. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Vanessa visited our home approximately twice a week, always during my predictable absences, court appearances, client meetings, networking events. Their routine rarely varied: conversation in the living room, disappearance upstairs, reappearance for coffee or a drink before departure. Archie always performed the same meticulous cleanup afterward. The most significant development appeared during their 6th documented visit. As they sat in the living room, Vanessa repeatedly rested her hand on her lower abdomen in a distinctly protective gesture. Though no audio accompanied the images, I could see Archie's expression transform from concern to what appeared to be cautious joy. He knelt before her, placing his hand beside hers, his face tilted upward in an expression of wonder I had never seen directed at me. I watched this scene unfold with clinical detachment, adding possible pregnancy to my growing case file. The attorney in me noted how this development potentially complicated divorce proceedings, if that was indeed where this evidence was leading me. Beyond documenting Vanessa's visits, the cameras revealed other concerning behaviors. Twice, I captured Archie in his home office examining financial documents that he hastily put away when he heard my car in the driveway. Once, he made a phone call while reviewing what appeared to be our joint investment portfolio, his expression calculating as he took notes that he later locked in his desk drawer. Most telling was the afternoon Archie brought Carl Harrison, his colleague from Meridian Financial, to our home. Their conversation in the office, though silent to my cameras, involved Archie showing Carl documents and both men nodding in apparent agreement. Before they left, Carl handed Archie a flash drive, which Archie immediately placed in his personal safe, not the shared one that contained our important household documents, but his private one, to which I had never been given the combination. By the 8th week of surveillance, I had accumulated over 30 hours of video documentation, meticulously logged and categorized. Vanessa had visited 11 times. Archie had conducted what appeared to be 5 suspicious financial conversations. And most significantly, Vanessa's changing body confirmed my suspicion of pregnancy, her loose clothing no longer concealing the subtle changes in her figure. What had begun as a need to confirm my husband's infidelity had evolved into something more comprehensive. A documented pattern of deception that extended beyond the emotional betrayal into potential financial impropriety. As a labor attorney, I recognized the parallels to cases I'd handled. Employers who systematically undermined employees' rights while maintaining a veneer of propriety. The question was no longer whether Archie was betraying me, but what exactly he was planning, and how I would respond when the full scope of his deception became clear. The cameras continued their silent witness, and I continued my parallel performance of the unsuspecting wife, knowing that eventually these dual realities would collide. 3 months into my surveillance project, the security system pinged with an alert during my lunch break. I was preparing for an afternoon deposition, but something compelled me to check the notification immediately. The camera in Archie's home office had activated, showing him and Vanessa reviewing documents spread across his desk. Curious, I expanded the video to full screen. Though I couldn't hear their conversation, their body language communicated urgency. Archie pointed repeatedly to specific sections of paperwork, while Vanessa nodded, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. What caught my attention, however, was the document prominently displayed at the center of the desk. Unmistakably our prenuptial agreement. My pulse quickened as I watched Archie flip through the pages, pointing out specific clauses to Vanessa, who now appeared visibly pregnant beneath her flowing top. At one point, he shook his head and made a dismissive gesture that I'd seen countless times when he considered something a minor obstacle. The confidence in his expression as he discussed our legal agreement with his pregnant mistress triggered something primal within me. This wasn't just an affair. This was strategic planning for a future that excluded me. After 20 minutes of discussion, Archie retrieved a folder from his locked drawer, the same drawer where he kept our financial documents. As he opened it, I caught glimpses of what appeared to be bank statements and investment records. He and Vanessa reviewed these papers with even greater intensity, with Archie occasionally using a calculator while Vanessa took more detailed notes. Their meeting concluded with what appeared to be a timeline sketched on a legal pad. Archie pointed to several dates, and Vanessa nodded in agreement. Before leaving the office, Archie gathered all the documents and returned them to his locked drawer, all except one paper that Vanessa folded and placed in her purse. That evening, after Archie had gone to sleep, I crept into his home office. Using the small flashlight on my phone, I carefully picked the lock on his desk drawer, a skill I'd acquired from a former client who'd worked as a locksmith before his wrongful termination case. Inside, I found our prenuptial agreement with certain sections highlighted, alongside financial statements from accounts I didn't recognize. One document particularly stood out, a statement from Cayman National Bank showing an account balance of $1.2 million. My name was nowhere on the paperwork. Another folder contained real estate information for a lakeside property purchased 6 months earlier under an LLC named Westview Holdings. Again, my name was absent, though Archie was listed as the managing member. I photographed each document meticulously, ensuring everything was returned to its exact position. As I closed the drawer, a sickening realization settled over me. Archie wasn't just betraying me emotionally. He was systematically hiding assets in preparation for what would likely be a calculated divorce once Vanessa's baby arrived. The final confirmation came 3 days later. I was scheduled to attend a 2-day labor law conference in Chicago, but at the last minute, the keynote speaker canceled due to illness. Rather than stay overnight as planned, I decided to return home unannounced. As I quietly entered our house late that evening, I heard voices from the kitchen. Through the open doorway, I glimpsed Archie and Vanessa sitting at our island, a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider between them. Moving silently, I positioned myself just outside the kitchen, finally able to hear their conversation directly rather than viewing it through silent video feeds. "The prenup is solid," Archie was saying, his tone reassuringly confident. "She'll get the minimum stipulated amount plus standard community property distribution. But with the offshore accounts and the property under Westview Holdings, she'll never touch the majority of our assets." "And she doesn't suspect anything?" Vanessa asked, her hand resting protectively on her now prominent baby bump. Archie laughed, a sound that sent ice through my veins. "Candace? She's brilliant with her labor cases, but she trusts me completely with our finances. Always has. She signs whatever I put in front of her without reading the details. By the time she figures anything out, everything will be finalized." "What? About Christmas?" Vanessa asked, changing the subject. "Are you sure it's a good idea for me to come? Won't your family ask questions?" "I've already told them you're a colleague with nowhere to go for the holidays," Archie replied easily. "I've explained that your family is overseas and you're pregnant and alone. They'll welcome you with open arms, especially my mother. She's been desperate for grandchildren. And Candace? She'll play the perfect hostess," he said with certainty that made my blood boil. "It's what she does. By New Year's, I'll tell her about us. The baby is due in March. Perfect timing. Quick divorce, quick remarriage before the birth." "I hate deceiving her," Vanessa said, though her tone carried more concern for inconvenience than genuine remorse. "It's cleaner this way," Archie assured her. "Trust me, I know my wife. She values appearances above everything. She'll want this handled quietly and quickly." As they continued planning my replacement in my own home, something crystallized within me. The passive documentation phase of my response was over. The time for simply gathering evidence had passed. Now, I needed a strategy, not just to protect myself financially, but to ensure Archie understood the full consequences of underestimating me so completely. I slipped out as quietly as I'd entered, driving to a nearby hotel where I checked in for the night. Alone in an anonymous room, I reviewed the photographs of Archie's hidden financial documents alongside selected screenshots from my surveillance footage. Then I made a call that would change everything. "Jacob," I said when the sleepy voice of the county's most formidable divorce attorney answered. "I need to cash in that favor immediately, and I need your absolute discretion." Jacob Steinman's office projected exactly the image you'd expect from the county's premier divorce attorney. Corner suite in the tallest downtown building, leather furniture in rich cognac, and walls adorned with subtle reminders of his victories. No garish plaques or certificates. Instead, tasteful artwork from grateful clients who could once again afford luxuries after he'd secured their financial futures. "I've been wondering when you'd call," Jacob said, gesturing for me to sit across from his imposing desk. "Though, I'll admit, I hoped it would be for another corporate consultation rather than personal matters." "Life rarely gives us what we hope for," I replied, placing my laptop and a USB drive on his desk. "That's why we have contracts and evidence." A hint of a smile touched Jacob's lips. 3 years earlier, I had helped his family's manufacturing business navigate a complex labor dispute that threatened their existence. Disgruntled employees had filed a class action lawsuit alleging systematic wage theft and unsafe working conditions. Rather than taking the scorched earth approach Jacob's father had wanted, I'd recommended a thorough internal audit, implemented corrective measures, and negotiated a settlement that ultimately strengthened the company. "You saved us millions," Jacob had told me afterward. "Not just in settlement money, but in future liability. You ever need anything at all, you call me." I never imagined I'd be collecting on that debt for my own divorce. "Tell me everything," Jacob said, leaning forward. "And Candace, don't edit. I need the complete picture, especially the parts that might hurt your case." For the next hour, I detailed my marriage's deterioration, Archie's affair with Vanessa, and my surveillance findings. I explained the camera system, my methodical documentation, and the financial records I'd discovered. Jacob listened without interruption, occasionally making notes but mostly watching me with assessing eyes. When I finished, he sighed deeply. "You've been thorough, as I'd expect from you. Let's review the evidence." I connected my laptop to his office monitor and began displaying the surveillance footage. We watched in silence as scenes of Archie and Vanessa played out across the screen. Their intimate moments in my living room, their discussions at my kitchen island, their review of financial documents in Archie's office. "The video quality is excellent," Jacob noted. "And you're certain these cameras were installed in common areas only?" "Absolutely. Living room, kitchen, home office, entryway, and back patio. No bedrooms, no bathrooms." He nodded approvingly. "Good. That keeps us clean on privacy statutes. Now show me these financial documents." I pulled up the photographs I'd taken of Archie's hidden accounts, the Cayman bank statements, the Westview Holdings LLC papers, and investment records for portfolios I'd never seen before. Jacob's expression darkened as he examined each document. Classic pre-divorce asset hiding, the offshore accounts, the property under an LLC. He's not being particularly creative, just calculating. He looked up at me. "How long has this been going on?" Based on the statements I found, he started, "Moving significant assets about 8 months ago." "And the pregnancy? How far along is she?" "From what I've observed, I'd estimate she's in her second trimester, perhaps 5 months." Jacob leaned back, steepling his fingers. "So he's been planning this exit for some time. The affair, the pregnancy, the financial maneuvers, it's all carefully orchestrated." "That's Archie," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Always 5 steps ahead, or so he thinks." "Well, he didn't count on you being a dozen steps ahead." Jacob stood and paced behind his desk. "What do you want out of this, Candace? Revenge? Maximum financial settlement? Clean break? Public humiliation? The path we take depends entirely on your end goal." I considered his question carefully. "I want 3 things. First, I want financial justice. Not just what the prenup stipulates, but my fair share of everything, including the assets he's hidden. Second, I want him to face consequences for his financial deception. And third," I paused, finding the words for something I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. "I want him to understand, truly understand, that I was never the naive, trusting fool he believed me to be." Jacob nodded slowly. "The financial aspects are straightforward enough. His attempts to hide assets will invalidate most prenuptial protections once we demonstrate bad faith. The consequences could range from civil penalties to potentially criminal charges, depending on whether he's evaded taxes or committed fraud in creating these structures." He sat back down, his expression thoughtful. "But that third element, making him recognize his fundamental misreading of you, that's the tricky part. That requires a certain theatrical element to the proceedings." "I've been thinking about that," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Archie has invited Vanessa to our family Christmas dinner. He's told everyone she's a colleague with nowhere, to go for the holidays. He's planning to announce our divorce after New Year's, then marry her before the baby arrives in March. A slow smile spread across Jacob's face, not warm, but appreciative. Christmas dinner, with his pregnant mistress, at the table, alongside your family and friends, and he expects you to play the perfect hostess, none the wiser. He shook his head. The arrogance is almost impressive. It presents an opportunity, I said carefully. Indeed it does. Jacob tapped his fingers rhythmically on his desk. A public revelation would certainly achieve your third objective. He'd have nowhere to hide, no way to control the narrative. Could we have divorce papers ready by then? I asked. Absolutely. But more importantly, we can have evidence of his financial deception prepared in a format that's digestible for your dinner guests. He glanced at his calendar. Christmas is 5 weeks away. That gives us time to do this properly. I'll want forensic accountants to trace all the hidden assets, and we should consult with a financial fraud specialist to determine if any criminal statutes have been violated. Jacob fixed me with a serious look. Candace, are you certain about this path? A private settlement would be cleaner, potentially quicker. I've been living a performance for months, Jacob. The trusting wife who suspects nothing while her husband plans her replacement. If I'm going to endure one more command performance at my Christmas dinner, I want it to end on my terms, not his. He nodded once, decisively. Then let's make it memorable. Jacob's corner office became my second home over. The following week, each evening after work, I would arrive with new evidence or documentation for the team he'd assembled. A forensic accountant named Phoebe Richardson, who specialized in high-net-worth divorce cases. A digital evidence specialist who verified the authenticity of my recordings, and a financial investigator with experience tracing hidden assets. The Cayman account is just the beginning, Phoebe explained during our third meeting, spreading financial diagrams across Jacob's conference table. Her sleek glasses caught the light as she pointed to various connections between entities. Based on the transaction patterns we've identified, we believe Mr. Mercer has established at least 3 additional offshore structures, one in the Bahamas, one in Switzerland, and potentially another in Singapore. How much are we talking about? I asked, steeling myself for the answer. Phoebe adjusted her glasses. Conservatively, around $3.4 million that we can document so far. But there are indications of property investments through the Westview Holdings LLC that could double that amount. The figure struck me like a physical blow. We had lived well, certainly, but not $7 million well. Where had all this money come from? That brings me to our other concern, Jacob said, his expression grim as he slid a folder across the table. Phoebe's team has identified several large deposits into Archie's hidden accounts that don't align with his reported income from Meridian Financial. I opened the folder to find transaction records showing deposits ranging from $50,000 to $175,000, each labeled as investment returns, but without specific sources. We can't make accusations without more evidence, Jacob cautioned. But these transactions raise serious questions about the source of these funds. Are you suggesting he's doing something illegal at his firm? I asked, the implications sending a cold wave through my body. At this point, we're simply noting anomalies, Phoebe interjected diplomatically. But given the pattern and the efforts to conceal these funds, we've flagged it for further investigation. Jacob leaned forward, his expression serious. Candace, I need to be clear about something. If Archie has engaged in financial impropriety beyond hiding marital assets, if he's involved in something like investment fraud or embezzlement, this case could expand beyond family court. We could be looking at potential criminal charges. I sat back, processing this information. What would that mean for our strategy? It means we need to tread carefully, Jacob replied. Criminal investigations take precedence over divorce proceedings. If we inadvertently trigger a fraud investigation before securing your financial interests, assets could be frozen or seized by authorities, making them unavailable in the divorce settlement, I concluded, connecting the dots. Exactly. Our primary objective remains protecting your financial interests. But we also have ethical obligations if we uncover evidence of serious wrongdoing. I considered this sobering development. What's our next step? We continue our financial forensics, Phoebe answered. But we also need to understand exactly what Archie does at Meridian Financial and who these large deposits might be coming from. Jacob nodded. I've requested his complete employment records through Discovery, but that will take time. In the meantime, is there anything in your surveillance footage that might provide insight into his professional activities? I thought for a moment. There were several meetings in his home office with colleagues. I didn't consider them particularly relevant to the affair, so I haven't reviewed them in detail. Those could be critical, Jacob said, especially any conversations about client accounts or investment strategies. That night, I devoted hours to reviewing previously overlooked footage, focusing on Archie's professional interactions in our home. What emerged was disturbing. Multiple meetings with Carl and 2 other colleagues from Meridian, often late at night, with documents spread across the office desk and animated discussions that occasionally escalated to apparent arguments. During one particularly tense exchange 3 weeks earlier, Carl had pointed repeatedly at a spreadsheet, his expression alarmed. Though I couldn't hear the words, I could read his lips clearly enough to make out regulatory and what appeared to be audit. I brought this footage to Jacob the next morning. After reviewing it with his team, he closed his laptop with uncharacteristic solemnity. Candace, I believe we're looking at something more serious than we initially thought. The body language, the late-night meetings, the hidden accounts. These suggest potential securities violations. He hesitated before continuing. I've asked a colleague from the white-collar crime division to consult, confidentially. My stomach tightened. What does this mean for our timeline? It complicates things, he admitted. If Archie is involved in financial impropriety at his firm, federal agencies could become involved. That would extend well beyond our Christmas revelation timeline. But it also strengthens our position, Phoebe pointed out. Courts look very unfavorably on parties who hide assets in divorce proceedings, add potential financial crimes, and Mr. Mercer would have virtually no negotiating leverage. Jacob nodded. The question becomes, do we want to go nuclear immediately or use this information strategically? I considered the implications carefully. If we alert authorities now, what happens? Likely an investigation that Archie would be immediately aware of, Jacob explained. Securities fraud investigations aren't subtle. They involve formal interviews, document requests, potentially office visits from regulators. He'd know something was happening, and he might accelerate whatever exit strategy he's planning with. And if we wait? We continue gathering evidence, both for your divorce and regarding any potential financial wrongdoing. We prepare everything for the Christmas revelation as planned, but with the additional leverage of what we've discovered. Jacob leaned back, studying me. But Candace, if we find concrete evidence of securities fraud, we have ethical obligations as officers of the court. I nodded, understanding the delicate balance. I don't want to impede any investigation into wrongdoing, but I also don't want Archie to slip away with hidden assets before I can secure what's rightfully mine. Then we proceed carefully, Jacob decided. Phoebe will expedite her financial forensics. Our digital team will analyze all relevant footage, and we'll prepare for Christmas with the understanding that what we're dealing with may extend well beyond an unfaithful husband hiding assets. As I left Jacob's office that evening, the stakes of my situation had escalated dramatically. What had begun as documenting an affair had evolved into uncovering what appeared to be systematic financial deception that potentially crossed into criminal territory. The Christmas dinner revelation now seemed less like an endpoint and more like the beginning of a much larger reckoning. 3 weeks before Christmas, our strategic planning shifted into high gear. Jacob's office had been transformed into a command center dedicated to my case, with 3 whiteboards tracking different aspects of our approach: financial discoveries, legal strategy, and the Christmas revelation plan. "We've made significant progress," Jacob announced, gathering our expanded team around the conference table. Beside Phoebe sat Maxwell Reeves, a former SEC investigator now specializing in financial crime consultation, and Clara Jenkins, my privacy law expert who had helped ensure all our evidence would be admissible. Maxwell began with the financial overview. "We've documented approximately $4.8 million in hidden assets across multiple jurisdictions," he explained, distributing detailed reports. "The good news is, we've established clear trails showing these were marital assets improperly diverted, which strengthens our position for recovering them in the divorce proceedings." "And the concerning news?" I prompted, noting his careful phrasing. Maxwell exchanged glances with Jacob before continuing. "We've identified suspicious patterns in Archie's client accounts at Meridian Financial. Several high-net-worth clients show unusual investment returns, consistently outperforming market averages by significant margins, even during downturns. This pattern, combined with the irregular deposits to Archie's hidden accounts, raises serious red flags." "Are you suggesting he's running some kind of investment scheme?" I asked, my legal mind immediately considering the ramifications. "We don't have conclusive evidence," Maxwell cautioned, "but the patterns are consistent with what I observed in several fraudulent investment operations during my SEC tenure. The question becomes whether Meridian Financial is aware of or involved in these activities," Jacob interjected. "This adds a layer of complexity to our strategy. If Archie is engaged in securities violations, federal authorities would eventually become involved. That could freeze assets and complicate the divorce settlement." "But it also provides additional leverage," Clara pointed out. "Evidence of financial impropriety would completely nullify any prenuptial protections and potentially justify punitive distributions in the divorce." I considered this information carefully. "What's our best approach given these new discoveries?" Jacob turned to the whiteboard labeled Christmas Strategy and began outlining our refined plan. "We proceed with the holiday revelation as discussed, but we modify our presentation of evidence. We lead with the affair and pregnancy, the emotional betrayal, followed by evidence of hidden marital assets, which directly impacts the divorce proceedings." He paused, drawing a line on the board. "We keep any evidence suggesting securities. Violations separate for now. That becomes our secondary lever, used only if Archie attempts to contest the divorce terms we present." Clara nodded approvingly. "That keeps us ethically sound while maintaining strategic advantage. We're not obligated to immediately report suspicions of securities violations, but we can use the existence of such evidence to encourage a favorable settlement." "Exactly," Jacob confirmed. "Assuming Archie is rational, once he realizes the extent of evidence we've gathered about hidden assets, he should recognize his prenup is effectively invalidated and negotiate reasonably. And if he doesn't?" I asked. "Then we mention our concerns about certain investment irregularities and suggest that regulatory authorities might be interested in reviewing the same evidence we've gathered." Jacob's expression was grim but determined. "It's not blackmail. It's simply acknowledging the reality that our investigation has uncovered potential issues beyond the scope of family court." With our overarching strategy established, we turned to tactical details. Phoebe reviewed the specific financial documents we would present, clear, indisputable evidence of Archie's hidden assets organized chronologically to demonstrate his systematic deception. Clara addressed the legal documentation. "I've prepared the divorce petition with detailed exhibits. We'll have a process server on standby Christmas Day. As soon as you give the signal, they'll formally serve Archie with the papers." "What about the surveillance footage?" I asked. "How do we present that without revealing I've been recording in our home for months?" Jacob smiled. "That's where timing becomes crucial. The revelation needs to unfold in specific stages with the surveillance evidence introduced at the optimal moment. He walked us through the sequence. First, evidence of the affair through text messages and emails I had legitimately discovered. Second, financial documentation revealing hidden assets. And finally, when Archie inevitably denied or minimized these allegations, the video evidence that would conclusively demonstrate both the affair and his financial deception. "We need to be prepared for various reactions," Clara cautioned. "Denial, anger, attempts to turn the situation around by accusing you of invasion of privacy. That's why the sequence matters," Jacob emphasized. "By the time we reveal the surveillance, he'll have already been caught in multiple lies. His credibility will be shattered." As our meeting concluded, Maxwell raised one final concern. "There's a possibility, however small, that Archie might suspect something before Christmas. Have you noticed any changes in his behavior?" I considered the question. "He's been increasingly secretive about his phone, but that's been ongoing. Otherwise, he seems confident, almost relaxed, like everything is proceeding according to his plan." "That works in our favor," Jacob noted. "The element of surprise remains our greatest advantage." In the days that followed, I maintained my performance as the unsuspecting wife while our preparations intensified. Jacob's team created comprehensive documentation packages, one set for me to reference during the revelation, another for immediate filing with the court, and emergency copies secured in multiple locations. Technical preparations were equally thorough. The surveillance system was enhanced with secure backup protocols to prevent any potential tampering. Jackson installed a discrete connection between our home security system and my laptop, allowing me to display selected footage on our living room television with a single command. For the Christmas dinner itself, we choreographed every detail. The seating arrangement was planned to position Archie and Vanessa where they would be most visible to all guests. The timing of each revelation was plotted to maximize impact while maintaining control of the situation. Even the menu was selected, to create natural breaks in the meal where revelations could occur without disruption. "Remember," Jacob advised during our final planning session, "emotional control will be your most powerful tool. When Archie realizes what's happening, he'll attempt to provoke an emotional response. Anger, tears, anything that might undermine your credibility or create sympathy for him. Your calm, factual presentation will be far more devastating than any emotional outburst." As I reviewed our meticulously crafted strategy, a sense of cold clarity settled over me. What had begun as documentation of betrayal had evolved into something more comprehensive, a systematic dismantling of the facade Archie had constructed around our marriage and his professional life. "Are you ready for this?" Jacob asked as we concluded our final preparation meeting. "I've been preparing for months," I replied with quiet certainty. "It's Archie who isn't ready for what's coming." As Christmas approached, maintaining my performance, as the unsuspecting wife became increasingly challenging. Archie had begun discussing holiday preparations, including casual mentions of his colleague who would be joining us. "Vanessa's family is all in Australia," he explained over breakfast 2 weeks before Christmas, watching me carefully for any reaction. "Her flight home was canceled due to some booking issue. I told her she could join us rather than spending the holiday alone in her apartment." I looked up from my coffee with perfect composure. "That's thoughtful of you. No one should be alone at Christmas, especially in her condition." Archie's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "Her condition?" "Pregnancy?" I clarified, maintaining an innocent expression. "You mentioned she was expecting when you first brought up inviting her, didn't you?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, quickly replaced by smooth recovery. "Right, of course. I forgot I'd mentioned that. It's still early, only showing a little. She's been quite private about it at the office." "Well, I'll make sure we have some non-alcoholic options for the toast," I assured him, turning back to my breakfast as if the conversation held no special significance. That evening, Archie called to say he would be working late, another of his transparent excuses to spend time with Vanessa. Taking advantage of his absence, I met with Jackson to verify that our technical preparations remained secure. "The system's solid," he confirmed after running diagnostics on the surveillance network. "I've added an encrypted backup that updates hourly to a secure server. Even if he somehow discovered and disabled the primary cameras, we'd still have all the existing footage preserved." "And the display connection to the living room TV?" Jackson demonstrated the simple command sequence. "On my laptop, one click, and whatever footage you select appears on screen. I've preset 5 key video segments based on your specifications: the initial affectionate encounters, the pregnancy revelation, the prenup discussion, the offshore account conversation, and the Christmas planning meeting." "Perfect," I said, feeling a cold satisfaction at the precision of our preparations. The following days brought a new complication as Archie began showing unusual interest in our financial documentation. I discovered him in our home office one evening, reviewing our joint investment portfolio with uncharacteristic attention. "Just year-end tax planning," he explained when he noticed me watching from the doorway, "making sure we're optimized before the new fiscal year." "Would you like my input?" I offered, stepping into the room. "I've been working on some interesting tax cases lately." "No need," he replied, closing the portfolio binder with suspicious haste. "It's fairly straightforward. Nothing that would interest you." Later that night, I checked the office surveillance footage and watched as Archie methodically photographed several pages from our joint financial documents, then made a phone call. "I need to accelerate the timeline," he said to someone, presumably Vanessa, his voice captured by my phone, which I'd left recording on his desk during dinner. "She's asking questions about the accounts. We need to move the remaining funds by the end of the year, before she has any reason to look closely at the statements." This discovery prompted an urgent call to Jacob. "He's planning to transfer more assets before New Year's," I explained. "Should we intervene?" "Actually, this works in our favor," Jacob replied after consideration. "Let him proceed. Each new transfer strengthens our case for systematic financial deception. Our forensic team is monitoring all the accounts we've identified. We'll document every movement. And if he empties the accounts completely, the courts can claw back improper transfers, especially with our evidence of intent. More importantly, the more he transfers, the stronger our case becomes for potential criminal charges if he proves difficult during divorce proceedings." With this assurance, I maintained my performance, allowing Archie to believe his financial maneuvers remained undetected. Meanwhile, I began subtle preparations for the Christmas dinner that our guests would interpret as normal holiday planning. I arranged for my sister Clara and her husband to arrive early, ensuring allied witnesses would be present from the beginning. I scheduled the dinner for later than usual, 7 p.m. rather than our traditional 5 p.m., which allowed Jacob's process server to be in position for the evening's conclusion. Each detail was calibrated to support our strategic revelation while appearing completely ordinary. 10 days before Christmas, Archie escalated his deception with a carefully staged phone call received during our dinner. "Carl, slow down," he said with practiced concern, stepping away from the table. "What audit? When did this happen?" I continued eating calmly, though I noticed how he watched for my reaction from the corner of his eye. After several minutes of theatrical conversation, he returned to the table with a grave expression. "I'm sorry, but there's an emergency at the office. The SEC has launched a surprise audit of several client accounts. I need to go in and prepare documentation." "On a Saturday night?" I asked mildly. "That seems unusual." "Regulatory bodies don't care about convenience," he replied, already gathering his keys. "This is serious, Candace. I could be there all night." "Would you like me to come with you?" I offered. "I might be able to help with the regulatory compliance aspects." Alarm flashed briefly across his features. "No, that's not necessary. It's mostly pulling electronic records and preparing statement histories. Nothing you'd find interesting." After he departed, I checked the location tracking app I'd installed on his phone weeks earlier, with careful attention to legal parameters surrounding such monitoring. As expected, he wasn't heading toward his office downtown, but toward the upscale apartment complex where Vanessa lived. Later that night, the surveillance camera in our kitchen activated as Archie returned home just after midnight. He made a phone call while fixing himself a drink. "It worked perfectly," he said, his voice low but triumphant. "She didn't suspect anything. The SEC audit story will give me cover for being at the office late all next week while we finalize everything." He paused, listening. "Yes. All the transfers should be complete by Christmas Eve. Then we just get through this ridiculous dinner and I'll tell her right after New Year's." Another pause, longer this time. "No, I don't feel guilty. She's been checked out of this marriage for years, focused on her career and those endless labor cases. This is better for everyone. Once the divorce is settled, she'll have enough to be comfortable, and we can start our family with a clean slate." The casual dismissal of our 8-year marriage as a mere inconvenience to be settled quickly stung more than I had anticipated. Throughout my surveillance, I had maintained professional detachment, approaching the evidence gathering as I would any case. But hearing Archie's cold assessment of our relationship and his plan to replace me with a more convenient version of family life penetrated that detachment. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of his deception, not just the affair or the financial manipulation, but the fundamental dishonesty that had apparently characterized his view of our marriage from the beginning. I recorded his conversation, added it to our evidence file, and sent a brief update. To Jacob. Financial transfers accelerating before Christmas. Confirmed plans to announce divorce after New Year's, proceeding with Christmas revelation as planned. Jacob's response came immediately. All preparations on track. Forensic team documenting every transaction. Christmas dinner will be memorable, just not in the way he's expecting. Christmas Eve arrived with a crystalline clarity, both in the crisp December air and in my resolve. I moved through the day with meticulous attention to detail, preparing our home for the following evening's dinner while mentally rehearsing each stage of our planned revelation. Archie had been absent most of the week, his SEC audit emergency, providing convenient cover for what our surveillance revealed were extended meetings with Vanessa and his suspicious financial contacts. When he did come home, he was distracted but surprisingly affectionate, a man confident in his exit strategy and therefore generous in his final days of deception. "The house looks beautiful," he commented that evening, surveying the decorations I'd arranged with strategic precision. The dining room was particularly striking, with the table set for 12, and the new television mounted conveniently on the wall for ambient holiday scenes during dinner. "Thank you," I replied, adjusting a centerpiece candle holder for optimal sightlines. "I want everyone to remember this Christmas." If he detected any double meaning in my words, he showed no sign of it. Instead, he handed me a small wrapped package. "A little pre-Christmas gift. I thought you might want to wear it tomorrow." Inside was an elegant emerald pendant, expensive but impersonal, the kind of gift one might give a valued employee upon retirement. I recognized it immediately as a guilt offering, probably purchased at Vanessa's suggestion to ease his conscience. "It's beautiful," I said, fastening it around my neck with steady hands. "I'll definitely wear it tomorrow." Later that night, I laid out my clothes for Christmas Day, a sophisticated burgundy dress that projected confidence and authority rather than festive frivolity. Beside it, I placed a small portfolio containing key documents I might need for reference during the revelation. I checked my secure email one final time, confirming arrangements with each member of our team. From Jacob. Process server confirmed. For 9 p.m. arrival. All legal documents prepared and ready for filing immediately. From Phoebe. Financial summary completed. Latest transfers documented. Forensic timeline updated through today's activities. From Clara. We'll arrive at 5 p.m. as planned. Carl and I will follow the protocol we discussed if Archie becomes confrontational. Each message reassured me that our carefully constructed plan remained intact, every contingency accounted for. Yet as I closed my laptop, an unexpected wave of emotion caught me by surprise. Not regret or hesitation, but a profound recognition of endings and beginnings. Tomorrow would mark the final chapter of a marriage built on misplaced trust and systematic deception. It would also begin my reclamation of power and truth. The evidence was gathered, the strategy set, the allies positioned. All that remained was execution. In bed beside me, Archie slept soundly, a man without knowledge of the reckoning that awaited him. I studied his face in the dim light, searching for traces of the person I had once believed him to be. In sleep, the calculated charm and practiced sincerity fell away, revealing someone I now realized I had never truly known. "Enjoy your last night of ignorance," I whispered, too softly to disturb his rest. I turned away and closed my eyes, finding unexpected peace in the clarity of purpose. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and revelation, shock and denials, perhaps even anger and recrimination. But it would also bring truth, undeniable and irrefutable. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself thinking not about what I was about to lose, but what I had already reclaimed, my agency, my dignity, and my refusal to be diminished by someone else's betrayal. Christmas morning would dawn on the final performance of my role as the deceived wife. By evening, the performance would end, and the truth would finally take center stage. Christmas Day unfolded with methodical precision. I rose early, the house still quiet, and began final preparations for the evening ahead. Each element of the dining room was verified once more: the strategically positioned seating cards, the discreet laptop connection to the television, the subtle recording devices placed to capture the evening's revelations. By noon, the house filled with holiday scents: roasting turkey, cinnamon-spiced cider, fresh pine from the decorated tree. The familiar domestic rhythms provided a surreal counterpoint to the calculated plan about to unfold. I moved through these preparations with mechanical efficiency, my mind focused on timing and execution rather than festive celebration. Archie emerged mid-afternoon, dressed casually but with obvious care. "Need any help?" he offered, pouring himself coffee. "Everything's under control," I assured him, arranging dessert plates with precise spacing. "Though you could check the wine selection for dinner. I've put several options in the bar cabinet." As he busied himself with this task, I noticed him checking his phone repeatedly, presumably coordinating with Vanessa about her arrival. His nervousness manifested in small ways, adjusting his watch, rearranging wine bottles unnecessarily, clearing his throat before speaking. "Nervous about something?" I inquired innocently, testing his composure. "Just want everything to be perfect," he replied quickly. "First Christmas with some of my new colleagues attending. Appearances matter." "Indeed they do," I agreed, allowing a hint of double meaning to color my tone. If he noticed, he gave no indication. At precisely 5 p.m., the doorbell announced Clara and Carl's arrival. Their early appearance was part of our strategy, ensuring allied witnesses were present from the beginning. Clara embraced me with meaningful intensity, whispering, "Are you ready for this?" beneath the cover of holiday greetings. I nodded almost imperceptibly as I welcomed them inside. Carl, briefed on the situation, engaged Archie in casual conversation about holiday markets and year-end bonuses, keeping him distracted while Clara accompanied me to the kitchen for final preparations. "Jacob confirmed everything is in place," she murmured, arranging appetizers on a serving tray. "The process server is positioned nearby, waiting for your text signal. Are you sure you want to go through with this? We could still handle it privately." "I'm certain," I replied, my voice steady. Archie chose to conduct his betrayal in our home, in our bed, using our resources. He doesn't get to dictate a quiet, dignified exit on his terms. Clara squeezed my arm supportively. Then we're with you all the way. By 6:30 p.m., most guests had arrived. Archie's parents, Margaret and Howard, looking polished and patrician. My father, Robert, still somewhat bewildered by my insistence he attend despite his usual holiday solitude. Two couples from Archie's firm who had been friendly with us for years, and Jackson, invited under the pretense of being a new client but positioned to handle any technical issues that might arise with our planned presentation. Vanessa's arrival at 6:45 p.m. created the expected stir. Visibly pregnant in a tasteful navy dress, she presented the perfect image of the vulnerable colleague stranded during the holidays. Archie's greeting was carefully calibrated, professionally warm but not overtly intimate, though I noted his hand lingering slightly too long at the small of her back as he guided her inside. Everyone, this is Vanessa Lewis, one of our top portfolio analysts, he announced with practiced casualness. Her flight home was canceled, so I insisted she join us rather than spend Christmas alone. The guests responded with appropriate holiday welcome, though I caught Clara's eyes narrowing slightly as she observed the familiar way Vanessa navigated our home. Not hesitating about where to place her coat or which direction to turn toward, the living room. Archie orchestrated introductions with transparent strategy, emphasizing Vanessa's professional accomplishments while repeatedly mentioning her unfortunate situation of being alone during the holidays. His mother, Margaret, responded with predictable maternal solicitude, immediately engaging Vanessa in conversation about her pregnancy while casting pointed glances at me, her childless daughter-in-law of 8 years. Throughout the pre-dinner mingling, I maintained perfect composure, the gracious hostess attending to everyone's needs while observing the subtle dynamics unfolding around me. Archie's nervous glances between Vanessa and me, his parents' obvious enchantment with the pregnant newcomer, the growing curiosity of other guests about this colleague who seemed unusually integrated into our personal lives. At precisely 7 p.m., I announced dinner was ready. Guests moved toward the dining room, finding their seats according to my careful arrangement. Archie at the head of the table, Vanessa positioned prominently at his right where everyone could clearly see her, me at the opposite end with clear sightlines to both of them and convenient access to the hidden laptop controls. As everyone settled into their places, admiring the holiday table setting, I caught Archie's eye and raised my water, glass in a subtle toast. His relieved smile confirmed his interpretation, that I remained oblivious to the deception playing out in my own home, the replacement of my role already underway, before the divorce papers had even been filed. Shall we begin? I suggested. My voice calm despite the accelerating heartbeat I kept carefully controlled. The time for performance was ending. The moment of revelation approached with each passing minute. The dinner began with practiced holiday civility, crystal glasses clinking, polite conversations flowing, appreciative comments about the perfectly roasted turkey and cranberry chutney. I maintained my role as attentive hostess, refilling wine glasses and guiding discussions with seemingly effortless grace. Archie appeared to relax as the meal progressed without incident. His initial nervousness gave way to increasing confidence, even bordering on smugness as he observed my continued performance of ignorance. Beside him, Vanessa participated in conversations with careful restraint, though I noticed her unconscious. Protective gestures, her hand occasionally drifting to her rounded abdomen, particularly when she laughed or shifted position. Midway through the main course, Howard, Archie's father, provided the opening I had anticipated. "So, what are everyone's plans for the new year?" he asked, looking around the table. "Any resolutions? Or big changes ahead?" "Actually," Archie interjected with rehearsed casualness, "Meridian Financial is expanding our client services division. I'll be heading the new initiative, which means some restructuring of my portfolio and responsibilities." I noted the careful phrasing, restructuring, and new initiative, code for the professional changes he'd need to make once his personal life imploded after New Year's. His eyes briefly met Vanessa's, a fleeting moment of shared understanding that didn't escape Clara's watchful observation. "That sounds significant," my father commented. "Will that mean more travel, or changes for you and Candace?" Archie's smile tightened slightly. "Some adjustments will be necessary, but Candace understands the demands of my position. She's always been—" He paused, selecting his words with insulting care. "Accommodating about my career requirements." "It's true," I confirmed, allowing a hint of edge to enter my voice. "I've always understood exactly what Archie's position requires." If he detected the double meaning, he showed no sign, merely nodding appreciatively before continuing. "Family? Planning is part of that consideration, of course. The right timing is everything." Margaret seized on this opening. "Speaking of family planning," she said, turning toward Vanessa with grandmotherly warmth. "How far along are you, dear? You mentioned earlier it's a boy?" "Almost 6 months," Vanessa replied with a smile that held genuine joy. "And yes, we found out it's a boy at the last ultrasound." "We?" Carl asked, emphasizing the word slightly as he looked between Vanessa and Archie. A flicker of panic crossed Vanessa's face before she recovered. "The doctor and I," she clarified quickly, "though my partner couldn't make that appointment." Archie cleared his throat loudly, redirecting attention by raising his wine glass. "I think this is an appropriate moment for a toast," he announced, his voice projecting confidence he clearly felt. "To new beginnings and unexpected blessings in the coming year." The guests raised their glasses dutifully, though several exchanged curious glances at the peculiar phrasing. As crystal clinked against crystal, Archie's gaze swept the table before settling on me with an expression of such profound condescension that something shifted irrevocably within me. "Speaking of unexpected blessings," he continued, his eyes still locked on mine, "sometimes life presents us with surprising opportunities when we least expect them. The trick is recognizing them when they appear." The statement hung in the air, a thinly veiled reference to his planned escape from our marriage into his new life with Vanessa. The audacity of delivering this message at my dinner table, in my home, surrounded by our friends and family, crystallized my resolve. As conversations resumed, Archie leaned toward Vanessa, whispering something that made her smile and touch her belly reflexively. The intimate gesture was witnessed by several guests, whose expressions registered increasing confusion about the nature of their relationship. "Archie," I said, my voice cutting through the ambient conversation with surprising authority. "Perhaps you'd like to explain to everyone exactly what kind of unexpected blessing you're referring to? After all, Christmas is a time for truth and revelation, isn't it?" The table fell silent as every eye turned toward us. Archie's expression froze somewhere between surprise and alarm, his wine glass suspended halfway to his lips. Vanessa paled visibly, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "I'm not sure what you mean," Archie replied carefully, setting down his glass with deliberate control. "No?" I questioned, my tone deceptively light. "Then perhaps I should be more specific." The moment had arrived. The trigger had been pulled. There would be no retreat from what was about to unfold. "Before we continue with dessert," I announced, standing at my end of the table with composed authority, "I'd like to address something that affects everyone here." I reached beneath my chair for the portfolio I'd positioned earlier, placing it on the table before me. Confusion rippled across the guests' faces. Archie's expression hardened into careful neutrality, though I detected the first hint of unease in his slightly narrowed eyes. "Candace, perhaps this isn't the best time," he began, an edge of warning in his voice. "On the contrary," I interrupted smoothly. "Christmas dinner seems the perfect setting, since you've already invited a special guest to share our celebration." I gestured toward Vanessa, whose complexion had drained of color. though colleague isn't quite the accurate term for her role. Is it? A heavy silence descended over the table. Clara shifted slightly in her seat, positioning herself to intervene if necessary. Jackson maintained his composure, hand casually near the small remote control hidden beside his water glass. I don't know what you're implying, Archie stated flatly, but you're embarrassing yourself and our guests. Am I? I opened the portfolio and removed several printed pages. Then perhaps you could explain these text messages between you and Vanessa, discussing your plans to divorce me after the baby is born. I slid the documents toward the center of the table, where several guests could see the highlighted exchanges. Archie's parents leaned forward, expressions shifting from confusion to shock as they scanned the visible messages. Margaret gasped, audibly at one particularly explicit exchange regarding their future plans. These are taken completely out of context, Archie snapped, reaching for the papers. And obtaining someone's private messages is illegal. Not when they're left open on a shared iPad in our home, I corrected calmly. But the messages are just the beginning. Would you like to explain the Cayman Islands account containing $1.8 million, or perhaps the Westview Holdings LLC that purchased a lakefront property 6 months ago? I removed additional documents from the portfolio, displaying bank statements and property records clearly showing Archie's name. His father, Howard, a retired financial executive, reached for the nearest statement with evident alarm. Archie, what is this? These structures? His voice trailed off as he recognized the implications. It's complicated investment planning, Archie insisted, his composure visibly fracturing. Candace doesn't understand financial strategy. She's fabricating connections that don't exist. Fabricating? I echoed, maintaining perfect control. Like the fabrication that Vanessa is merely a stranded colleague? Or the fabrication that you've been working late during those nights you've spent at her apartment? Vanessa finally spoke, her voice trembling. Archie, you said she didn't know anything. She doesn't, he hissed, shooting her a warning glance. She's bluffing. Am I? I nodded almost imperceptibly to Jackson, who pressed the hidden remote. The dining room television flickered to life, displaying crystal-clear footage of Archie and Vanessa in our living room. The date stamp showed 3 weeks earlier as they sat together on our sofa, his hand resting on her pregnant belly. Once the baby comes, I'll file the divorce papers, Archie's recorded voice stated clearly. Candace will get the minimum stipulated. In the prenup. She's too focused on her career to fight it, and she knows nothing about our financial arrangements. Every head at the table turned toward the screen in stunned silence. The footage continued, showing Archie kissing Vanessa before. The camera angle shifted to them entering our kitchen, completely at home in the space. You've been recording me? Archie demanded, face flushing with anger as he half rose from his chair. That's illegal. Actually, it's not, Clara interjected coolly. Single-party consent laws apply in this state, and recording devices in common, areas of one's own home are perfectly legal, particularly when documenting unauthorized visitors. You planned this entire evening, Archie accused, looking around the table with growing realization. This whole dinner was a setup. Not unlike your plan to bring your pregnant mistress to Christmas dinner under false pretenses, I replied, evenly. The difference is, my plan was based on truth rather than deception. The television now displayed Archie in his home office, discussing offshore accounts with Carl from Meridian Financial. She'll never find these transfers, his recorded voice assured. By the time the divorce happens, these assets will be completely untraceable. Howard Mercer's face had turned ashen. Son, what have you done? These look like structured transactions designed to hide marital assets. That's not just unethical. It potentially crosses legal boundaries. You don't understand, Archie insisted, desperation edging into his voice. This isn't what it appears to be. Then what is it? I asked, my voice steady as I removed final papers from my portfolio. Because from where I stand, it appears to be grounds for divorce, financial recovery, and possibly criminal investigation. I placed the final document on the table, a formal divorce petition meticulously prepared by Jacob's team. Your hidden cameras and invasion of privacy won't hold up in court, Archie declared, though his confidence had visibly eroded. That's where you're wrong, I said quietly. Every piece of evidence has been reviewed by legal counsel and forensic experts. The offshore accounts have been documented through legitimate financial investigation. The property transfers have been traced through public records. Your systematic efforts to hide marital assets have been comprehensively mapped and verified. As if on cue, the doorbell rang, Jacob's process server arriving precisely on schedule. That would be the legal papers being formally served, I informed him. Merry Christmas, Archie. Consider it an unexpected blessing. The process server's arrival detonated the remaining social pretenses like a precision charge. Howard Mercer intercepted the young woman at the door, his face grave as he accepted the documents on his son's behalf. These appear to be for you, he said, returning to the dining room and placing the envelope before Archie with palpable disappointment. Archie stared at the sealed legal papers without touching them, as though they might burn his fingers. Around the table, the carefully assembled dinner party had fractured into pockets of shocked whispers and averted gazes. Margaret Mercer dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin. My father sat straighter, a hint of pride visible beneath his concern. Believe, Clara announced with practiced authority. This might be a good moment for some guests to excuse themselves. She made deliberate eye contact with the two couples from Archie's firm, who gratefully seized the opportunity to escape the unfolding drama. Murmured apologies and hasty departures followed, leaving only immediate family, Clara, Carl, Jackson, and a visibly shaken Vanessa at the table. The selective reduction had been part of our strategy, creating a more controlled environment for the next phase of revelations. This is absurd, Archie finally spoke, pushing the unopened envelope away. You've orchestrated this entire spectacle based on misconceptions and illegally obtained information. The financial records came from legitimate sources, I corrected calmly. And, as Clara explained, the surveillance was entirely legal within common areas of my own home. Howard cleared his throat, years of corporate leadership evident in his commanding tone. Archie, these statements, he gestured toward the financial documents still spread across the table, show systematic concealment of assets. I recognize these structures. They're designed to hide money during divorce proceedings. Dad, I can explain. Can you also explain this? I interrupted, nodding to Jackson, who activated the next video segment. The television displayed Archie and Carl in our home office, surrounded by financial printouts. The client funds provide perfect cover, Archie's recorded voice explained. We route them through the placeholder investments, skim the percentages we discussed, then deposit clean. Returns that match market averages, the difference goes to our offshore accounts. Carl visibly flinched at the table, his expression confirming the damning nature of what everyone was witnessing. Turn that off, Archie demanded, real panic now edging into his voice. Those appear to be client funds he's discussing, Howard observed, his financial expertise allowing him to immediately recognize the implications. Candace, what exactly have you uncovered here? Evidence suggesting that Archie and possibly others at Meridian Financial have been conducting some form of investment fraud, I answered carefully. Our financial forensics team identified irregular patterns in client account management and suspicious deposits to Archie's hidden accounts that don't align with his reported income. Carl abruptly stood. I need to make a call, he announced, his complexion ashen. I had no idea the extent of... I need to speak with compliance immediately. Sit down, Archie hissed. She's bluffing. There's no financial forensics team. Actually, there is, I corrected. Led by Phoebe Richardson, formerly with the Securities and Exchange Commission's Enforcement Division. She's been documenting these transactions for weeks. At the mention of the SEC, Howard's expression hardened into something beyond disappointment. something approaching fury. You've been manipulating client funds, using my name, my reputation, to conduct fraud? It's not fraud, Archie insisted. It's aggressive portfolio management with specialized fee structures. It's securities fraud, Howard stated flatly. And it appears you've been using the proceeds to finance a hidden life while planning to abandon your wife. Vanessa, who had remained silent through the escalating revelations, suddenly pushed back from the table. You told me those accounts were legitimate investment returns, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You said everything was properly disclosed and reported. It is, Archie assured her desperately. This is a mischaracterization designed to pressure me into an unfavorable divorce settlement. Is that why you've been so nervous about the SEC audit? She pressed, protective hands cradling her abdomen. Is that why you created those backdated documents last week? Her inadvertent confirmation of further financial impropriety caused Carl to reach for his phone with shaking hands. I need to contact legal counsel, he muttered. I'm not going down for this. Margaret Mercer, silent until now, turned to me with unexpected directness. How long have you known about all of this, Candace? About the affair? 3 months. About the offshore accounts and hidden assets? 7 weeks, I answered honestly. About the potential securities violations? That became clear about a month ago. And you've just been… what? Playing along? Pretending everything was normal while gathering evidence? There was no accusation in her tone, only a kind of bewildered admiration. Yes, I acknowledged. As Archie planned his exit strategy, I developed my own. Howard pulled out his phone. I need to make some calls. The firm needs to be notified immediately about potential improprieties. He fixed his son with a gaze of profound disappointment. This goes beyond your marriage, Archie. There are regulatory and possibly criminal implications here. As Howard stepped away to make his calls, the carefully constructed life Archie had built began visibly collapsing around him. His marriage, his career, his reputation, and even his planned future with Vanessa all disintegrating simultaneously under the weight of exposed truth. Vanessa stood shakily. I need to leave, she announced, refusing to meet Archie's pleading gaze. I can't be associated with whatever this is. I need to protect myself and my baby. As she gathered her things, the cascading consequences continued to unfold exactly as Jacob had predicted, systematically dismantling every aspect of Archie's carefully planned deception. As the room gradually emptied, Vanessa departing in tearful confusion, Howard stepping outside for urgent calls to Meridian Financial's board members, Margaret accompanying my father to the living room to process the shocking revelations, Archie and I found ourselves momentarily alone at opposite ends of the dining table. The remains of our Christmas dinner lay forgotten between us, cooling food on fine china, half-empty wine glasses, elegant decorations now serving as surreal backdrop to the wreckage of our marriage. Jackson and Clara had tactfully withdrawn to the kitchen, remaining within earshot but giving us space for this inevitable confrontation. Archie stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a volatile mixture of fury, humiliation, and something approaching respect. He'd underestimated me so completely for so long that the revelation of my capabilities seemed to have fundamentally shaken his understanding of who I was. How long have you been planning this? He finally asked, his voice unnaturally controlled. How long have you been planning to leave me for Vanessa? I countered evenly. He gave a bitter laugh. That's different. I was trying to be kind, to wait until after the holidays, to handle things discreetly. By bringing your pregnant mistress to Christmas dinner, by systematically hiding our marital assets, by discussing your divorce strategy in our home. I kept my tone measured, my posture composed. Your definition of kindness is fascinating. Archie! You could have confronted me privately, he insisted. This public humiliation involving my parents, colleagues, it's vindictive and unnecessary. No, I corrected him. It's proportional. You didn't conduct your betrayal privately. You brought it into our home, included others in your planning, and intended to blindside me completely. You don't get to dictate the terms of its exposure. He leaned forward, abandoning pretense. What do you want, Candace? Is this about money? Name your price, and we can end this circus right now. The question was so fundamentally misaligned with my motivations that I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, almost liberating sound that clearly unsettled him. This isn't a negotiation strategy, Archie. The divorce proceedings will follow their legal course. The financial forensics have already documented your hidden assets, and your firm will need to address the evidence of securities violations independently. You've destroyed everything, he said quietly, the reality of his situation finally seeming to penetrate his defensive anger. My career, my reputation, my future with Vanessa, all of it, gone in one evening. No, I replied with unwavering certainty. You destroyed everything yourself. I merely revealed the truth before you could complete your exit strategy at my expense. He shook his head slowly. I never thought you were capable of something like this level of calculation, this patience. It's not the Candace I knew. That's precisely the point, isn't it? You never really knew me at all. You saw what you expected to see, a labor attorney too focused on her client's problems to notice her husband's deception, too trusting to question your financial maneuvers, too passive to fight back effectively. I stood, gathering the financial documents into my portfolio with deliberate calm. Your fundamental mistake wasn't the affair, or even the hidden assets, Archie. It was your absolute certainty that I wouldn't recognize what was happening, that I lacked the capacity to understand, or the resolve to respond. So this was all about proving yourself? He asked incredulously. About showing me you were smarter than I thought? No, I said, meeting his gaze directly. This was about justice. The same principle I've dedicated my career to, ensuring that those who abuse power and trust face appropriate consequences. You never respected my work because you never understood its foundation. Today, you experienced it firsthand. I closed the portfolio with finality. The divorce papers outline a settlement, proposal that my attorney considers reasonable given the circumstances. I suggest you review them with legal counsel. Though given tonight's revelations about potential securities violations, finding representation may become your more pressing concern. Archie's expression hardened as the full implications of his situation settled over him. You've been recording all of this too, haven't you? This conversation? Of course, I acknowledged. Documentation has proven essential throughout this process. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. This isn't over, Candace. Actually, I replied with calm certainty. It is. Merry Christmas, Archie. Consider it your last performance, in a role you never deserved. As I turned to leave, he called after me, desperation finally cracking his controlled facade. What am I supposed to do now? I paused at the threshold, considering his question with genuine thought rather than reflexive. Cruelty. For once in your life, Archie, face the consequences of your actions without expecting someone else to shield you from them. The hours following the confrontation unfolded with surreal clarity. Howard and Margaret Mercer departed with stiff formality, Howard promising to address this situation with the board immediately, while Margaret squeezed my hand with unexpected warmth, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Candace. I had no idea." Archie left shortly after his parents, taking only his phone, wallet, and car keys. His exit was unceremonious. No dramatic declarations or threats, just a hollow-eyed man walking away from the ruins of his carefully constructed deception. I watched from the window as he sat in his car for several long minutes, head resting against the steering wheel before finally driving away into the snowy night. Clara, Carl, and Jackson remained behind, helping restore order to the Abandoned dinner table with quiet efficiency. The domesticity of clearing plates and storing leftovers provided a strange counterpoint to the monumental shift that had just occurred in my life. "Are you all right?" Clara asked, finding me alone in the kitchen, staring absently at a half-wrapped platter of uneaten turkey. I searched for the right word, surprised to find it wasn't victorious or vindicated, but something more nuanced. "I'm present, fully present for perhaps the first time in months," she nodded, understanding what I couldn't quite articulate. "The performance is over. You don't have to maintain the role anymore." "Exactly." I exhaled slowly, feeling tension release from muscles I hadn't realized were perpetually contracted. I don't have to pretend not to know, not to see, not to understand. My phone buzzed with a message from Jacob. "Process server confirmed delivery, filing complete, restraining order in place regarding financial assets. Call tomorrow to discuss next steps." The clinical language of legal proceedings felt oddly comforting. A return to familiar professional territory after months of emotional surveillance and strategic planning. Carl approached hesitantly, his expression still bearing traces of shock. "I've spoken with Meridian's compliance officer. They're implementing emergency protocols to review all of Archie's client accounts." He paused, clearly struggling with professional and personal loyalty. "What you uncovered, it's more extensive than I realized. I thought it was just aggressive tax planning, not this." "Will you cooperate with the investigation?" I asked, directly. He nodded without hesitation. "I have no choice. And honestly, after what I've seen tonight, I don't want to be associated with any of it." As midnight approached, the house gradually emptied. Clara was the last to leave, embracing me, at the door with fierce protectiveness. "Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. Day or night." Alone in the silent house, I moved through each room methodically, noting the subtle traces of the evening's revelations. A napkin dropped in hasty departure, wine glasses with lipstick traces at various levels, the dining room television still faintly reflecting the empty chairs. In Archie's home office, I paused before the hidden camera disguised as a clock, my silent witness through months of deception. With deliberate finality, I powered down the surveillance system, ending the constant vigilance that had defined my recent existence. The performance was over. The truth was exposed. And for the first time in months, I could simply be myself. No longer the deceived wife, the strategic planner, or the patient investigator. Just Candace, facing an unwritten future with clear eyes and unburdened conscience. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.